Along with spike throwers, shredder gauntlets, and warrior bows, Boltblasters are one of the new weapon classes in Forbidden West. And while they're very powerful, they also have some specific limitations that can make them challenging to use. So in this video, I'll teach you everything you need to know to master Boltblaster gameplay. We'll cover their fundamental mechanics, best use cases, and how to manage their most frustrating limitations, along with which specific Boltblasters and ammo types are best, options for how to coil them, and the best weapon techniques and Valor surges to use. As with every video in this series, we've got a ton of info to cover, so let's go. First, let's understand Boltblasters at a high level. Like their Zero Dawn predecessor, the Rattler, Boltblasters are intended to be powerful, high fire rate weapons used for raw damage output, a bit like a machine gun or minigun in an FPS game. You should use a Boltblaster when you need to deal a lot of damage fast, similar to a sharpshot bow. Though of course sharpshot bows do this with a single high precision arrow, whereas Boltblasters work by firing lots of relatively low damage bolts very quickly. While they are capable of massive damage output, Boltblasters have some trade-offs and unique mechanics you'll need to understand to use them effectively. The most important Boltblaster mechanics to understand are their reduced mobility penalties. First, there's a relatively long reload time, and while reloading, you're completely immobilized. This can be frustrating on its own, but Boltblasters will also begin to automatically reload when a new ammo type is selected, or if the currently selected ammo type is depleted. I'm sure many of you guys know how annoying that can be in the middle of combat. Dodging while holding a Boltblaster is different too. Aloy has to throw herself out of the way instead of doing the normal roll. This animation is less controllable and takes a little longer to recover from. Additionally, Aloy can't transition from aiming to sprinting as quickly with the Boltblaster because she first has to sling the weapon onto her back. And finally, fully charging a Boltblaster burst takes a fairly long time. Like any weapon, mobility is reduced while drawing, so this long draw time lengthens the period of decreased mobility. Altogether, these mobility penalties make Aloy much more vulnerable to attacks while using a Boltblaster. But remember, the trade-off is massive damage output, so with some strategies to manage these mobility penalties, we can use the Boltblaster very effectively. Before we get into those strats though, there are a few more facts to know about Boltblasters. None of the Boltblaster ammo types deal any tear damage, so they'll easily destroy components instead of removing them, which prevents you from looting them. However, Boltblaster bolts can trigger elemental canister explosions. In fact, they're the only other ammo type besides arrows that can do so. Normally, I'd recommend using arrows over bolts for this, but if you're in the early to mid game and you don't have shock arrows, the blue shock Boltblaster can be a nice weapon for dealing shock damage and triggering sparker canisters, like I showcased in my Tremor Tusk hunting guide. You should also understand how Boltblasters fire. When tapping R2, a Boltblaster will fire 3 rounds in a very inaccurate burst. When tap firing like this, damage is also reduced by 25%, and maximum range is reduced to 40 meters. When charged up a bit, indicated by the overdraw halo appearing, you'll fire 6 rounds in a tighter spread, all at full damage, and you'll get a max range of 50 meters. So compared to a tap fire, the damage potential is about 167% greater, in other words 2.67 times more damage, so you pretty much never want to tap fire a Boltblaster. And you only need to see the overdraw halo appear to get this. You don't need to draw it completely to the point where you get the overdraw whiskers. That would be a fully overdrawn burst, which does at least 15% extra damage, sometimes more depending on the particular Boltblaster's perk, increases accuracy by 20%, and range to 60 meters. Regardless of what situation you're using your Boltblaster in, keep in mind you can trigger concentration while drawing and firing to make aiming easier. And in general, you should always at least partially draw until you see the overdraw halo, and most of the time, it's worth going to a fully overdrawn burst for maximum damage, range, and accuracy. The one exception would be when using the spread blast weapon technique, which can be tap fired without issue. Another limitation is that Boltblasters, along with spike throwers, sharpshot bows, and tripcasters, can't be used while sliding, jumping, or falling, which means you can't use the hidden quick draw mechanic in any of these common ways. If you want to learn more about quick draw, I'll link my video on secret combat mechanics down below, but for now, all you need to know is that quick draw provides a method for increasing draw speed and creating a slow motion effect similar to concentration. The most common ways to trigger this are by sliding or jumping, but even though we can't do either of those things with a Boltblaster, there's still a way to get it to work, which we'll discuss in a minute. You should also know that the clip size depends on the rarity of the Boltblaster and which ammo type you're using. Across any one rarity, the maximums for a particular ammo are the same. For example, all the blue rarity Boltblasters equipped with regular bolts can load 30 of them, but there's a big difference between rarities. For example, the blue plasma Boltblaster can load 25 advanced bolts, while the purple Relentless can load 35. And the two legendaries, the Blastforge and Brawlbreaker, can load a whopping 50. This makes a big difference because it means you won't need to reload as often, and we want to avoid that slow reload animation as much as possible. If you're frustrated using a lower level Boltblaster, then just know that a big part of that is probably because you're having to reload a lot lot more than you'll need to with a better one. Alright, that's enough about how bolt blasters can be challenging to use. Let's talk about how to manage those limitations and use bolt blasters effectively. Now I think experienced bolt blaster users fall into one of two broad categories. You either like to use normal bursts or the spread blast weapon techniques. You can play a little more dynamically and take advantage of critical hits. Or you're like me and you like using the sustained burst weapon technique, which is very powerful but can be a little trickier to pull off effectively. Both playstyles are equally valid and can be very strong, but in either case there's no way around the fact that you simply can't be as agile and dynamic with a bolt blaster as you can with other weapons. Instead of trying to use it in the same way you'd use a bow, you'll want to be more intentional. You'll probably only use your bolt blaster a few times during a fight, maybe even just once or twice, and often as a finisher, so we really want to focus on maximizing the amount of damage we deal during those few moments we use it. A big part of maximizing bolt blaster damage is avoiding all of those frustrating mobility penalties as much as possible to minimize the chance we get hit. Typically, you're going to need to create openings for yourself to use the bolt blaster safely. A popular way to do this is freezing a machine into the brittle state and then immediately firing off some overdrawn bolt blaster bursts, or better yet, using either the sustained burst or spread blast weapon technique. The short lockup animation when you trigger the brittle state can give you an opportunity to charge up a bolt blaster shot. Of course, the brittle state also gives us a 2x impact damage multiplier and removes the ability for armor plates to block damage. This pairs really nicely with the bolt blaster since it's difficult to aim accurately, and every bolt you fire will deal double damage. Another similar combo is to apply the corroding state with acid ammo before following up with the bolt blaster. There's a brief animation when the corroding state triggers, and similar to brittle, it reduces the effectiveness of armor plates dramatically. They'll only block 20% of your damage as opposed to the normal 80% or 95% on Apex machines. The corroding state also doubles a weapon's base critical hit chance, which for bolt blasters is 10%, so it will go up to 20% while the corroding state is active. Speaking of which, a crit build on a bolt blaster can work really well. Bolt blaster crits hit for 2x damage, which is quite high, but the default 10% crit chance won't give us many critical hits. By coiling the bolt blaster with critical hit chance coils, we can hit those double damage crits more often and dramatically increase our overall damage output. This works really well in combination with the freezing and corroding steps we just discussed. However, bolt blasters won't hit crits at all while using the sustained burst weapon technique. So if you go for this build, you should only use regular bolt blaster bursts or the spread blast weapon technique. By the way guys, if you enjoy these weapon masterclasses, it would be awesome if you consider leaving a like on this video. That lets me know what kind of content you want to see and also helps me out. If you want to see a masterclass for warrior bows, then definitely leave a like for that and let me know in the comments. I've had requests for both warrior bows and rope casters, so I'm thinking about doing both. Anyway, another tactic for safely using a bolt blaster is to fully immobilize the machine either using shock, knockdown, or a rope caster tie down. Shock will stun a machine for 10, 15, or 20 seconds depending on its weight class, with bigger machines staying down longer. This provides plenty of time, and with this strategy I recommend targeting a weak spot or component with your bolt blaster to increase damage further. If you like using a bolt blaster in combination with shock, then you could consider coiling your bolt blaster with shocked enemy coils. These give you a solid 18% damage boost, but like corroding enemy damage coils, they are limited to a pretty specific situation. You can use knockdown similarly to shock, but the stun time will only be 8, 10, or 12 seconds. However, knockdown damage coils come in a purple 25% version, so you can deal a lot of damage by using these while a machine is in the knockdown state. My favorite way to trigger knockdowns is by using drill spikes, but there are other options too. Just keep in mind that to trigger a knockdown on most of the bigger machines, you have to deal knockdown damage to their legs. If you want to learn more about knockdown, I'll link my damage types video down below. Finally, you could use a rope caster to tie down a machine before unleashing your bolt blaster. Dealing any significant amount of damage to a tied down machine will immediately free it from the ropes. But before dealing damage, you have a full 90 seconds to position yourself perfectly for a devastating shot to a weak point or component. I showed a great example of this as well as leveraging knockdowns in my Slaughter Spine hunting guide. Earlier, I mentioned that even though we can't jump or slide with a bolt blaster, there is still a way for us to trigger the hidden quick draw mechanic, which makes it faster for us to charge up our bursts. The first way is to draw the bolt blaster immediately after hitting an enemy with a melee attack. Quick draw is triggered after a melee hit, so you can run up to a machine, give it a nice whack, and then start charging up your bolt blaster burst right away. It will charge a little faster, and you get a brief concentration-like slow motion effect, which makes it a little easier to aim. A safer way to leverage this is to first use one of the immobilization methods we just discussed, shock, knockdown, or tie down, and then do the melee attack immediately followed by the bolt blaster shot. Just keep in mind that it's possible this quick draw method is a bug. According to the official guide, quick draw can can be triggered by specifically melee air combos. Currently, it works by following up any melee attack, but don't be surprised in the future if it requires an air combo. Regardless, for this method, you'll want to consider using purple melee follow-up coils, which each give a 25% damage boost for 10 seconds after performing a melee attack. The second method of triggering quick draw is to use a Bolt Blaster while mounted. Drawing a weapon on a mount will always trigger the quick draw mechanic. Not only will this give you faster draw speed and the slow motion effect while aiming, it also allows you to move much faster than you normally could with a Bolt Blaster, and, more importantly, reload it while moving. The downside is that you can't use the sustained burst weapon technique at all while mounted, but you can use the others. So those are some great ways to use a Bolt Blaster from relative safety, but sometimes you are going to have to dodge and reload when things aren't ideal. Fortunately, we have some tricks for making the slow animations a little less painful. The simplest way to avoid the awkward dodge is to first let go of R2 to stop aiming and move a bit so Aloy will put the Bolt Blaster away and then dodge afterwards. If you wait for her to sling it on her back, you'll be able to dodge and slide normally. However, this does take extra time, which you sometimes don't have. So instead, you can utilize the game's weapon quick swap mechanic to instantly switch to another weapon right before you need to dodge. With this active, open your weapon wheel and hit square on a particular ammo type. This will add a small white dot, which indicates that you'll instantly swap to this ammo type by tapping L1 without opening the weapon wheel. Quick swap also works without setting a preferred ammo, it will just switch back and forth between the two most recently used ammo types. So when you want to dodge with the Bolt Blaster, you can just tap L1 right beforehand and it will switch to another weapon, letting you dodge or slide normally. Then you can tap L1 again to switch back to your Bolt Blaster when you're ready. The quick swap trick is also great for canceling the reload animation when you need to move suddenly in the middle of a fight. While reloading, you're unable to move at all, but with quick swap setup, you can just tap L1 to switch weapons and the reload animation will stop, allowing you to move freely. Other options for canceling the reload animation include dodging, which works, but of course gives you the clumsy animation, or using a melee attack by hitting R1 or R2. Thanks to Paris for sharing that one with me over on Discord, as well as sharing a lot of other tips that made it into this video. I really like the quick swap technique though, and I use it to shorten my reload animation even when I don't need to get out of the way quickly. You just need to keep an eye on the ammo clip indicator in the bottom right, and hit L1 after you see the clip reloaded. A couple of additional tips on reloading. The Bolt Blaster can only have one type of bolt loaded at once, and if you purposely or accidentally switch ammo types, the reload animation will start automatically. This can be quite annoying, so be careful when rolling around the weapon wheel to make sure you land on the Bolt Blaster ammo you actually want. Also, if you forget to load your Bolt Blaster before heading into combat, it will start reloading as soon as you go to use it. Don't forget about the quick swap trick to cancel these unexpected reloads. Also, as I'm sure many of you have experienced, if you hit square a little too quickly, you'll crouch instead of reload, and you can get stuck crouching and uncrouching for a moment if you keep spamming square. Unfortunately, the best way to manage this right now is to simply wait a moment before hitting square. Alright, let's quickly run through Bolt Blaster ammo types, and then we'll cover the best Bolt Blasters, coils, weapon techniques, and Valor surges. Overall, because Bolt Blasters are best used as high damage weapons, advanced bolts are the most useful ammo because they have the highest impact damage. Regular bolts are the predecessor to the advanced version, so you'll have to use these on blue Bolt Blasters until you can upgrade to a higher rarity. Piercing bolts would be my second choice for damage. They still deal a decent amount of impact damage, plus they can penetrate armor plates. They're more expensive to craft though, requiring piercing spikes, so I wouldn't recommend using them much. Explosive bolts have a lower amount of impact damage, and then detonate to deal explosive damage after a 2-second delay. If you add the two damage stats together, they are greater than an equivalent advanced bolt, but explosive damage can only be boosted 25% by the brittle state. So if you're freezing a machine before most of your Bolt Blaster shots, then the total amount of damage works out to a bit less than just using advanced bolts, plus advanced bolts are cheaper to craft. We also have elemental bolts for shock, plasma, and frost. As I mentioned before, these are the only other ammo type besides arrows that can trigger canister elemental explosions. They can also build up elemental states directly, but hunter bows and even blast slings outperform them here. The only time I might use elemental bolts is on a machine that's weak to either shock, plasma, or frost. Overall, I recommend sticking to advanced bolts and using your Bolt Blaster to deal large amounts of impact damage. All bolts will require metal bones to craft, and the best source for those is the ammo drums found on Tremor Tusks and Thunderjaws. Tremor Tusks are especially good because they have 4 of these drums. I'll link my guide for hunting them down below. As for the best Boltblasters, the first one I recommend picking up is the Plasma Boltblaster. Not for the plasma bolts, but because this is the only blue Boltblaster with advanced bolts, so it has the highest damage potential. The Shock Boltblaster can also be useful early on since you don't have many options for a shock weapon. You can buy both of these in Scalding Spear. For purple rarity weapons, the Ice Storm gives you access to all 3 elemental bolts if you like using those, but I think the clear choice is the Relentless Boltblaster, which is the only one with advanced bolts. Unfortunately though, you can't buy it with shards. You need 54 Hunting Grounds medals to trade in at the arena, and I know a lot of people don't like the Hunting Grounds. In this case though, I think it's worth it, because the Relentless is powerful enough to be used as an endgame weapon, and if you don't like the Hunting Grounds, then you're really not going to like doing the arena to get the 80 medals you need for the legendary Blast Forge, which is, in my opinion, the best Boltblaster in the game. The second legendary Boltblaster, the Brawl Breaker, is only available during New Game Plus, and does have higher base damage output, but it also has an 8% instant adhesive chance perk, which currently doesn't do much besides override your brittle states at the worst possible moment. Also, if you prefer to coil your Boltblaster for maximum critical hit chance, then the Blast Forge is better hands down, because it has a 15% critical hit chance perk built in. Combined with the base 10% chance and 5 15% coils, you'll literally have a 100% chance of hitting crits on every shot, whereas the Brawl Breaker has a maximum critical hit chance of 85%. Speaking of coils, let's run through all the best coil options for your Boltblaster. We've already mentioned how critical hit chance, shocked and corroding enemy damage, knockdown damage, and melee follow-up coils can be useful. In addition to these, I would also recommend considering both close and long range coils, critical hit damage coils, regular impact coils, and both reload and draw speed coils. I personally use a mixture of close range and impact damage coils on my Blast Forge because I generally use it at closer range, but I also often use it a little further away, so I like the regular 12% impact damage coils for the flexibility. However, if you're after maximum damage, you should choose some combination of the 25% coils. For example, all close range or a mixture of melee follow-up in close range. Long range coils are a good option too, but you'll need to make sure you're at least 30 meters away from the target for them to trigger. Critical hit damage coils are a decent option if you're going for a crit build and don't have enough critical hit chance coils yet. Reload and draw speed coils do help speed up those actions, but ultimately I recommend using most or all of your Boltblaster's coil slots for some of the other coils we covered. We've already talked about 2 of the weapon techniques, Sustain Burst and Spread Blast, which are the 2 most powerful. Sustain Burst does have a slight edge because you can equip 5 25% coils to get a 125% total damage boost, which is more than the 100% damage boost you can get from a full crit build. However, Spread Blast combined with a crit build can be more flexible, working at any range and not requiring the 5 seconds of complete immobility that Sustain Burst does, so either one is a great choice. The third option is Ultra Shot, which is a burst of 10 bolts dealing explosive damage that can reach up to 80 meters. It's fairly strong and the range is nice, but overall this is still the weakest of all the weapon techniques, so I don't really recommend using it. But it is worth noting Ultra Shot deals full damage even if you don't have 10 bolts available to fire, so it can be nice to use when you just have a few bolts left. And it doesn't matter which ammo type you use, so you'd want to use the cheapest you've got. Combining Sustain Burst or Spread Blast with a Valor Surge can push Boltblaster damage to truly insane levels. My top pick is Ranged Master because it increases damage by 100% when using a weapon technique. If you're not going to use a weapon technique, then Power Shots is a good option too, increasing damage from regular bursts by 200%. Critical Boost is another option, especially if you're really into the crit build. By using this, you can reduce the number of critical hit chance coils loaded on your Boltblaster and instead load up on your choice of 25% coils for even higher damage. Alright guys, that's my masterclass for Boltblasters. I hope these tips have helped you get comfortable using this powerful weapon. If you enjoyed this video or learned something new, leaving a like would be much appreciated. And if you have a Boltblaster tip I didn't mention, definitely let us all know in the comments below. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.